Have you ever noticed how people naturally choose the shortcut? At work, employees may avoid complicated systems and return to spreadsheets. Customers prefer apps that are faster and easier to use. Teams bypass long approval processes just to get things done quicker. Even in our daily lives, we choose the route, tool, or method that requires the least amount of stress, time, and effort. But why does this happen? The answer lies in a powerful behavioral concept known as the principle of least effort. This principle explains that human beings naturally move toward the easiest available path to achieve a result. Not always because they are lazy, but because the brain is constantly trying to conserve energy, reduce friction, and simplify decision-making. And this principle quietly shapes almost everything around us: workplace behavior, leadership effectiveness, customer experience, technology, adoption, productivity, organizational culture, and even operational failures. The easier a process feels, the more likely people are to follow it consistently. The harder and more complicated it becomes, the more likely people are to avoid it, delay it, or create shortcuts around it. This is why some organizations struggle with compliance, process discipline, and system adoption, while others create environments where the right behavior happens naturally. Because great leaders understand something important. People do not just need instructions. They need systems designed around human behavior. In this episode of Management Principles Explained, we will explore what the principle of least effort really means, where it originated from, how it affects organizations and leadership, why employees create shortcuts, why simplicity drives performance, and how leaders can design systems that make the right behavior the easiest behavior. Because sometimes, the biggest organizational problems are not caused by bad people, but by systems that make the wrong path easier than the right one. Have you ever introduced a new process at work, only for employees to ignore it completely? Or maybe a company launched a brilliant system, but people still preferred spreadsheets, WhatsApp messages, or shortcuts. Why does this happen? It is not always laziness. It is not always resistance. Sometimes, it is human nature. Welcome to this episode of Management Principles Explained. Today we are exploring the principle of least effort, one of the most powerful behavioral principles influencing leadership, productivity, systems design, workplace culture, customer behavior, and organizational performance. Because whether we realize it or not, people naturally move toward the path that requires the least energy, least stress, and least resistance. And great leaders understand this. This series breaks down timeless management and behavioral principles in a simple, practical, and relatable way. Not just theory, but real workplace application. Because many organizational problems are not random. They are predictable patterns driven by human behavior, systems design, incentives, communication, leadership, and organizational structure. In the episode 1, we explored the Pareto principle, the famous 80-20th rule. Today we move into another principle that quietly shapes everyday decisions inside companies, teams, and even our personal lives. The principle of least effort. The principle of least effort states that human beings naturally prefer solutions that require less effort, less time, less complexity, and less resistance. In simple terms, people usually do what feels easiest, not necessarily what is best, not necessarily what is most strategic, not necessarily what is most effective long-term. Just what feels easier in the moment. This principle appears everywhere. In workplaces, in technology, in customer behavior, in leadership, in communication, and even in relationships. The easier something becomes, the more likely people are to adopt it consistently. And the harder something feels, the more likely people are to avoid it, delay it, or find shortcuts around it. The principle of least effort became widely recognized through the work of linguist George Kingsley Zipf in the 1940s. Zipf observed that people naturally minimize effort in communication and behavior. For example, people shorten words, simplify language, avoid unnecessary steps, and choose familiar routines. Over time, researchers discovered that this principle extends far beyond language. It influences workplace behavior, customer choices, organizational systems, technology, adoption productivity, and leadership effectiveness. Today, some of the world's most successful companies are built around this principle. Think about companies like Amazon, Uber, Netflix, Apple. Their success comes partly from reducing friction. The easier they make an experience, the more people use it. One of the biggest mistakes leaders make is assuming people will always do the right thing simply because they were instructed to. But behavior is heavily influenced by effort. If a process feels slow, stressful, confusing, repetitive, or frustrating, people naturally search for easier alternatives. This is why many organizations struggle with policy compliance system, adoption reporting, accuracy, employee engagement process, discipline, and operational consistency. Not because employees are incapable, but because the system itself creates friction. Great leaders understand something important. If the right process is difficult, people will eventually create shortcuts. Imagine a company introduces a new HR leave management system. The official process requires multiple login steps, several approval layers, complicated navigation, and long waiting times. What happens next? Employees begin sending WhatsApp messages, instead calling supervisors directly, or avoiding the system entirely. Managers also resist using it because it feels slower than the old method. Eventually, reporting becomes inconsistent. Approvals get delayed, records become inaccurate, and HR loses visibility. Now here is the important part. The issue is not always resistance to technology. The issue may actually be poor system design. The system violated the principle of least effort. People simply chose the easier path. This principle is extremely visible in manufacturing and operations environments. Imagine a safety process that requires operators to complete a long checklist before starting equipment. But production pressure is high, targets are aggressive, and the checklist takes too long. Eventually, operators may begin skipping steps, not necessarily because they are careless, but because the easier path saves time and reduces pressure. This is how many operational failures begin. Leaders often blame individuals first, but high-performing operational leaders ask a different question. What in the system is encouraging this shortcut? This mindset changes everything. Because sustainable performance is built through system design, not constant policing. The principle of least effort also explains customer behavior. Why do customers prefer certain products or services? Often because they are easier. Think about one click, ordering contactless payments, streaming services, food delivery apps, autofill forms. The companies reducing friction usually win faster adoption. Customers naturally move toward convenience. This is why user experience matters. The easier a process becomes, the more likely people are to repeat it. Organizations that ignore simplicity often lose customers to competitors who make things easier. Now here is where this principle becomes dangerous. Because the easiest path is not always the best path. Sometimes the easiest path creates poor quality, weak discipline, ethical shortcuts, safety risks, or long-term failure. For example, skipping audits, avoiding difficult conversations, copying old reports, poor performance documentation, ignoring compliance procedures. All of these are easier in the short term, but costly in the long term. This is why leaders must balance simplicity with accountability. The goal is not to remove standards. The goal is to remove unnecessary friction. The principle of least effort teaches leaders several important lessons. First, if you want consistency, simplify processes. Second, if employees constantly bypass a process, investigate the design before blaming people. Third, good systems reduce unnecessary effort. Fourth, training alone cannot fix broken workflows. And finally, the best leaders remove friction from high performance, because people are more likely to follow systems that are clear, simple, fast, logical, and practical. This is where operational excellence and behavioral psychology meet. High-performing organizations apply this principle intentionally. They automate repetitive tasks, simplify approvals, reduce unnecessary meetings, improve user experience, streamline reporting systems, simplify training materials, and redesign workflows around human behavior. Because they understand an important truth. People do not rise naturally to complexity. They drift naturally towards simplicity. That is why the best organizations build systems that make the desired behavior easier, faster, and more natural. The principle of least effort reminds us that human behavior is deeply influenced by system design. People naturally move toward convenience, toward familiarity, toward lower resistance. And the organizations that understand this principle gain a major advantage in productivity, customer experience, operational excellence, leadership effectiveness, and organizational culture. So the next time people avoid a process, resist a system, or create shortcuts, do not ask only, why are people doing this? Also ask, what about the system is making the wrong behavior easier? Because great leadership is not just about managing people. It is about designing environments where the right behavior becomes the natural behavior. Thank you for watching this episode of Management Principles Explained. If you enjoyed this breakdown of the principle of least effort, subscribe to the channel for more practical leadership and workplace insights. See you in the next episode. If you found this valuable, subscribe for more insights on leadership, productivity, and career success. Because leadership is not just about achieving results. It's about how you achieve them. Remember, effectiveness isn't about doing more. It's about doing what matters. Apply these and watch your life transform. See you in the next video. Monday Thompson is a strategic productivity systems specialist with almost 2 decades of real-world experience helping individuals and organizations move from intention to execution. Here, you'll learn how to build habits, systems, and routines that compound over time, the same principles used to drive sustainable performance in high-impact environments. If you're serious about growth, consistency, and long-term success, you're in the right place. Subscribe, comment, like, and share for more. The ones who think they are crazy enough to change the world are the ones who do.